graduation. Welcome. First, we're going to have the salute to the flag. Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call.
Mr. Byrne? Here. Mrs. Swan?
Here.
Dr. Beer?
Here.
Mrs. McCune?
Here.
Mrs. McGowan?
Here.
Mrs. Shaw?
Here.
Mrs. Richmond?
Here.
Mrs. Waldron?
Here.
Mr. Martinari?
Here.
Mr. Sy?
Here.
Madam President?
We're up to statement of public notice, which I'll just point out to you and you can read at your leisure if you get bored later during the meeting. Item 5 is our student representative. We have Anna Sadhu-Hazari here. Hello.
Hi. So what we've been doing at school is we just finish up ice rotations and we have us running during our free periods. So notice that all the students got. And then aside from that, the seniors are starting to come in spirit. And the juniors are playing and doing that factor. And that's everything that we're doing.
Any other questions? Is it hard getting back after all the surveys?
Yeah, I'm not really used to it. We'll get next to it next week, so I'm excited about that.
That's true. Okay, thank you. You're welcome to stay for the meeting or if you're home or wherever it is. Okay, thank you.
Okay, good.
Okay, item number 6 is the superintendent's report. There are 2 items. Can I have a motion to discuss that?
I move by Ms. Tip.
Second, Linda?
Sure, thank you. So we have 2 things. One is our noted HIB report for this board meeting, but probably a little bit more interesting, I wanted to highlight the first item. Normally, for our Board of Ed meetings, when we have a field trip, a day trip, that does not involve an overnight stay anywhere, we have a section of the agenda where we just we note the location and how many students are going on the trip. For this particular trip, we're actually doing it a little bit differently just because of the nature of the trip and the fact that we got a last-minute invitation, if you will, to have our 5th grade chorus from Liberty Corner appear on Good Morning America. So since it was last minute and since the students that are invited to go on this trip have to get up probably around 3:45 in the morning, they've got to be over at Liberty Corner School at something like 4:15 or so to get on a bus in order to get into New York City. I wanted to kind of give the board ample opportunity to have lots of information about how this was all going to happen because it's such a unique experience for the students and also an opportunity that came to us rather last minute. I guess that's just how they roll at Good Morning America. But I did the best I could working with the folks over at Liberty Corner School. And in fact, Mr. Oliver, I see him here, our assistant principal at Liberty Corner, and Ms. Beadle is next to him. They are both here to answer any questions that you might have. I know that I did send the board members some information about this trip. And if you have any questions, I'm sure that between Mr. Oliver and Ms. Beadle, they would be happy to answer them for you. But I'm very excited about it. I think it's a really unique opportunity for our students. And therefore, I bring it to you for your approval.
In case we can watch it, I'd just like to know when it's on. Best guess.
8:45. When it's on television? 8.
First of all, congratulations, I think it's a unique opportunity. I'm assuming you're allowed to go, but what's the student, I read the paperwork, I didn't see the ratio of adult chaperones to students, and hopefully there's enough chaperones and teachers are not being pulled out of the classroom.
So there are 66 students involved. We have 9 people going total. Of those 9, one is Dr. Oliver and one is the nurse. So then that means that there are 7 teachers that are involved. But of those, one of them's a guidance counselor, so he doesn't need a substitute. And then if needed, the specialists can kind of share responsibilities. Like if I go as a music teacher and our teacher goes, if we need to, maybe a PE teacher could take over during one of our classes and take a couple of kids. So maximum 4 or 5 subs.
How come I didn't hear any parents in the room?
We didn't have any we didn't choose any parents or chaperones.
There are many that are interested if we want to open it up to that, but
Well, it reduces the cost. I mean, why have teachers go when parents can go and we don't have to spend so much money?
Well, it was a discussion we actually had, Dr. Carr, myself, and Mrs. Beal. And just because it was last minute, we weren't going to be able to have meetings with parents to talk about all the logistics and make sure that they're on board and do exactly our expectations for the day. We thought it would be best to actually use our staff.
So we're paying for 9 subs essentially.
No, we're not paying for 9 subs because some of this, the guidance counselor is not being subs. We get
a reading
specialists.
specialist with the assistant.
7 subs.
No, and then the nurse, and then
So I think we're looking at 4 right now. It's everything else is free. Transportation is being provided.
I saw that. And then why is it just the Reading Corner School? We have 3 other elementary schools in our school system. What makes the Reading Corner so special? Is what they were asked.
the connection, the
So
student.
is it parent connection?
No, there was a student that went to Ridge High School, his name was Jeff O'Donnell, graduated about 4 or 5 years ago, who was, he was a great student here at Ridge, and he's going forward to university now, getting his business degree, but he's auditioning, has agents and all sorts of connections, and we've stayed in touch because I worked with him during the musical. And when, as a friend of his at ABC contacted him to see if he knew any youth course, he said ours, because I worked with him before, and he comes to Liberty Corner for a couple outreach programs when he was involved with some of the musicals at Ridge.
So you didn't try to get the other schools, you just did your own school.
And part of that's funding, they can only provide so much busing.
Okay. Very excited for We're all taking the show.
Any other questions about
Next report. Okay, we're all
That's I'd like to ask a question about the HIP. Where do the accusations come from? Parents, students, staff?
Generally, they're not from staff members. Typically, they're from individual students or parents that approach a teacher or an administrator, guidance counselor, and then as soon as the accusation comes up, it gets reported to the principal and goes from there.
Mr. Byrne?
Yes.
Mrs. Horn?
Yes.
Dr. Vera?
Yes.
Mrs. Cassell? Mrs. McGowan?
Yes.
Mrs. Shaw?
Yes.
Mrs. Richmond?
Yes.
Mrs. Waldron?
Yes.
Mrs. McHugh?
Yes. We're up to public forum on agenda items. I'd like to open public forum. If you have any comments, please come up and put your name and address on the clipboard.
8, which is approval of the minutes. Do I have a motion, please? Deb? Elaine? Second. Does anyone have any questions or comments about the minutes? Okay, can we have a roll call, please?
Mr. Byrne?
Yes.
Mrs. Swarm?
Yes.
Dr. Vera? Yes. Mrs. Cassell? Mrs. McGowan?
Yes.
Mrs. Shaw?
Yes.
Mrs. Richmond?
I'm abstaining from the first 2 executive sessions. My name is Elizabeth Member. Yes, on that.
Mrs. Wooldridge?
Yes.
Mrs. McKim?
Yes. We're up to committee reports. We have finance. Would someone like to make a motion to move items 1 through 9? Finance. Elaine? Second, Linda? Elaine, did you want to say anything?
Yeah, I got up minutes late, we had our meeting late last Thursday, and I found the minutes up today. Hopefully people had time to look at it, there's a couple of issues that are on the, couple items that we talked about in finance that are on the agenda tonight. One is the PSE&G direct install grant.
Sorry about that. One is the PSE&G Direct Install Grant, and this is a great opportunity, getting a very large portion of a project paid for by the utility. They pay 80% of our redoing the lighting. It's going to start at Oak Street School to start with, but it's doing all the lighting in the school, 39 classrooms, the cafeteria, the office, conference rooms, restroom storage areas, the gym, and the building exterior. We're going to get far more efficient lighting, and PSE&G is going to pay the cost 100% upfront, and we will pay only 20% of the total cost, interest-free over 24 months. Our total cost will be $12,929, which is a great price for a big project like that. And the other nice thing about that is that once we complete this project, assuming it's approved by the board tonight, we will be able to have PSE&G come out and look at our other schools and do the same for those. So I think that's a great thing because lighting is very expensive, and this is a way to get not only new fixtures, but it's also an opportunity to get, these are all going to be far more efficient than what we have right now. So that's one item. The other item that we talked about, and which is on the agenda tonight, is the addendum, the ROD grant project. Certainly ROD is actually better off talking about it than I am, but what we talked about in the Finance Committee was this opportunity, which is, once again, an opportunity for us to pay a smaller portion. We'll pay 40%, and then, I was reading it, Mike. Okay. The ROD grant will pay 40%. These are state regular operating district grants, and we will cover 60% of it. But what this is going to allow us to do is take care of some projects that have been sort of hanging out there for many, many years, and we really need to take care of. These are sort of necessary projects. For example, one of the big 2 items on this project is the unit ventilators, which are the heating and ventilation units in our classrooms. I never knew this was a name for it, but that's the thing that looks like a radiator that's by the window in all the classrooms. Which is shocking to us that we found out in finance this week, is that 82% of our unit ventilators are 35 to 62 years old. The average life expectancy is 15 years for one of these. So it's crazy. And once again, one thing we also learned is that we owe a lot of kudos to our maintenance staff, because how they keep these things running, given that the average age is 44 years, and they're supposed to own another 15 years or something. So we're going to be able, with the ROD grant, to replace all the antiquated ones in Cedar Hill, Liberty Corner, Oak Street, and in the older areas, and in Ridge. Not only will we get new unit ventilators, which will allow us more efficient heating and cooling opportunity, but also it'll allow the air quality to improve, something like 15% in our classrooms. In addition, the unit ventilators, we're going to have a central control system, which is something really important because we all know there are hot rooms, there are cold rooms. This is going to allow us to keep a consistent temperature and not waste energy when we don't need it. For example, when the buildings aren't being used. So that's a very important part of the project. And the other part of the project is something that is more complicated to explain, but it has to do with the Oak Street roof, and it would cover 40% of the costs of replacing part of the Oak Street roof, and it's part of the Oak Street roof that's angled. I know there's probably a better way to explain it. Pitched, okay. But it's the non-flat is how I refer to it in a minute. And what we had done in prior years, there'd been a lot of talk about the roof over the years. We've done roofing work in, I guess, the early 2000s, but that work was mostly on the flat part of the roof. And the old part is the pitched part, and that's what we'd be addressing with this. We also saw photos, and I think the Spiesel people are here today to talk about it, maybe if we have questions. Right, but really, it was amazing to see the images of what the underside of that roof looks like. This isn't about the shingles, which I think I sort of don't know that much about roofs, so I assumed it has something to do with the shingles on the outside of the building. But really, it has nothing to do with that. If you look at the understructure, and we have great pictures, it's all rotted. So there's big holes, because just think about when you're nailing into a piece of wood, once you nail a hole into it, you compromise the structure. So if you put several different levels of shingles on a roof several times over, you're continually making holes in the roof. So that's what or into the underlayment, which I guess decking. Okay, I'm trying. And then in addition, the fascia and the gutters also are completely rotted, and that's something else. And once again, this is the kind of project that we've known we've needed to do for many, many years, but we just didn't have the capital to outlay for the project all at once. So having this opportunity of this broad grant is a wonderful chance to be able to get this project done and have a safe roof. It's not that we hadn't identified the problems for years, but it's just a big capital outlay that we just didn't have the funding for. So I think that takes care of the issues that are on the finance. Oh, air conditioning. And the other aspect of the unit ventilators, which is nice, is that obviously when we were put in, we didn't have air conditioning in our older buildings, but the new unit ventilators will allow us to add the air conditioning as part of the temperature control. It's another part of it, but I'm not going to explain any more than that. But I think it's just another part of the process. And what it allows us to do is, once again, instead of having window units, which we've installed in some of the buildings, we're going to have a central system so that people can turn them on, turn them off. It's going to be a much more efficient way of heating and cooling the buildings. And once again, air quality is improved. I think we've all had students who've been at some of these schools in the days of June or early September, and it's very difficult to learn anything in the way stifling rooms that we have. So this is going to be important. It's also going to be in the cafeterias and in the public spaces, which I think we've all sat in meetings in some of those rooms, which are very unpleasant, and you can only imagine during the heat of the day. So I think this is going to be a nice positive as well. And it's the air conditioning is coming not as a goal in and of itself, but as a sort of a side benefit of getting these unit ventilators done and bringing them more to modern code. So is that somewhat accurate? Okay, that's pretty much, I think, what we talked about. We have the other issues, but we can talk about those with the finance report. Any questions?
Finish the items. Okay, so questions about the items?
Yeah, I have a question about the road grant. When do you expect to get the funds? And when will this project actually come?
So it's a multi-step process, obviously. Recall this summer we applied to the BOE to begin this process. The DOE issued its letters of approval, which then triggers these offers from the School Development Authority, which we now have. And based on, we have to go through the process of giving them a detailed application for each one of these 11 projects. We're not quite sure as to what their time frame is for processing it. They've geared up, but keep in mind they've issued quite a few. They had $500 million worth of funds to allocate to this tranche of funding that they offer. So there are hundreds, if not thousands, of these grants theoretically that are out there that are being processed. That's why we want to try to get at the front end of that process. The way the funding actually works is once they've awarded it, they're committed to giving us that money. It's a commitment for them to give us those funds. And then they generally will reimburse you as you go. So there are steps in the particular budget, once you will allocate funds to a particular capital project, in which you would submit reimbursement to them. First step would be your soft costs. So after you've done your design work, let's say, you've got all of that done, you submit a bill to them, and they reimburse you. So that's how it works. They don't give you the money up front. They give you the grant offer, which is a letter of, basically a letter of commitment. Yes.
The total amount of the rod grant, are we using it all up, or is there still some that we could use?
Well, you're talking about the grants? Or
So
the
the amount of
gra-
reimbursement that we were approved for, are we using all of it up?
Are we applying for all of this? Yeah. Yes, the question
So
is.
there's nothing left that we could apply for?
Not at this time, yeah. The deadline for applying for those things was, there was a very limited window, was from somewhere around the middle of June of last year to the end of August, first week or so in September, which is why we met, if you recall, in August for a special meeting to try to get these in.
I just want to make sure we're using all the things we were approved for. And then the other question is, I guess, I don't know the answer, but I think the windows of payment or another big capital outlay, we never have the money for. Is it too late to ask for that, rod grant money?
Under the rod grant, under this grant, but there are a couple of things that may happen. First of all, everyone has been given their award offers, if you will. They now have to do what we're doing, which is we're trying to stay ahead of that way. We were in August with our applications. Lots of folks didn't get it until September. We're trying to get the grants in sometime in the next month or two, which is why we're moving the resolution tonight. Once we get that, and I think all the districts are going through that process, we're going to find out if they all decide to apply for all the offers that have been made to them, and where can they come up with their share of matching funds. There's the possibility out of $500 million that maybe some of that money is not going to be utilized by those which it was originally awarded. We can see if, they're going to come back to districts and say, look, we'll now consider a second round against this offering of funds, this $500 million.
You're guessing there may be some.
Yes. We have nothing definitive, but I think there's a good possibility that could happen.
So is there a list ready to go?
Yeah,
That happens?
absolutely, because the finance committee the facilities committee have been looking at a long-term, capital plan and how we would fund all of the projects that have been on our list for years prior to that, which include those ones as well.
Okay. And hopefully thank you. She knows what I want. Is the science going on that list?
Yes, it is.
Right?
I have a couple comments and some questions. The vote tonight is not, what is the implication of the vote tonight on grant? Are we approving it tonight? Or are we approving the architect?
This approves the application for the grant from the SDA. It allows us to apply to be a school development authority for the 11 projects that you see there in the addendum to receive that total $4 million plus $430,000 in potential grants. The next step after those grants are approved by the school development authority would be for us to go to our architect of record and issue contract to them to begin the design phase work. That would be the next step.
So this is really authorizing the approval of the
Right.
grant?
If we don't, in other words, this is like finalizing a loan application for the bank, if you will. In the sense that we need to get this money committed to Berners Township, and the way to do that is to complete the SDA grant application process.
I think some of this is really wonderful, but we don't have all the costs yet. What are the operating costs going to be if we do put air conditioning in the buildings? What's that going to cost on an annual basis? There's questions like that I wanted answers for, and I think we're not approving that at this point.
No.
So
I
that's-
put that in the minutes, but I just wanted to point out that it was certainly something that I know you asked about, and that we're not approving any contracts right now. We're just asking to start the process of getting the money. And the other thing I wanted to mention that I think I said in the minutes, but I didn't say tonight, is that this is a conservative estimate on how much this is going to cost. We don't know exactly how much any of this is going to cost, but we don't ask for it. We certainly can't come in later to the state, I guess, under the rules and say we want more. So we need to be conservative about how much we think it's going to cost. But certainly we, as a finance committee, are going to go over the contracts. We're going to make sure that you're going to feel comfortable, hopefully, with what we're going to ask for and what the bids are going to be. And it's not going to be, this isn't the end of the day, this is just the start of the process.
Well, one of the purposes of my questions is to encourage all of the committees to, make a public statement of the air quality change. The air changes in each room, I think it's 5 times an hour. You could never afford to do that in your house. You'd go broke heating. So there's some questions of what the cost this would be on this when we get done. We also talked about the roof, the work done in 2002, I think. I didn't take accurate notes, but we had there was a question from the public a couple weeks ago, I think, a challenge that we wasted money or, and I think we budgeted $800,000 roughly in 2002, and I think Mr. McCarrion came up with an estimate of maybe $100,000 at the most.
Yeah, I didn't put that in, I put that in the minutes, but once again, I got them out today. Well, we were all talking about how we had significant expenditures at Oak Street in the early 2000s, and we couldn't recall why that was. It was $630,000 was spent on the flat roof section, but only $81,000 was spent on the slope roof section, which is once again the oldest part of the building, and what we hadn't really addressed, which had a lot of problems then, which we knew about, but we didn't do it because we didn't have the financing. So
Yeah, so just to be clear, the $630,000 that Elaine just referred to was the last time we had a grant to do project work at Oak Street. That $630,000 was actually roughly split equally between 2 aspects of repair. One aspect of repair had to do with roofing, the other aspect had to do with brick repointing. So of the $630,000, only $317,000 was actually spent on roof. The balance was on soft costs and pointing, brickwork. So of that $317,000, $81,700 was roughly estimated to be spent on the pitched shingled roof of the 1938 section of Oak Street. The balance of that $317,000 went towards the flat roofs. But the roof section that we're talking about working on at the time had, we estimate, about $80,000 worth invested into it.
Looking at the pictures at the finance committee meeting, I don't know that much about roofs either, but obviously that $85,000 just went to putting on shingles on top of something that's already a mess underneath that should have, if they had money at the time, should have been replaced, underneath, so everything was broken in half, but it wasn't, so.
The fascia and the gutters, I think, were also not done.
Right, the contract at the time did not call for a replacement of the gutters and the cornice that contained the gutters, which was built into the cornice. I believe they call those built-in gutters, if I have that right. Is that right, Tony? See, Tony's taught me a lot over the last 5 years.
My questions are, as you know, I don't get the emails, so if you send it out, I haven't gotten it yet. But it's more for the rest of the board and the public, I think, just some of the comments. Because I like the same thing, curriculum and what have you, just some observations. We also talked about health insurance.
Yeah, I was going to talk about that in a minute since that wasn't part of the.
Okay, that's fine. And the budget prep?
Yeah.
Okay.
We're gonna do the vote on just these items, then we'll do the other.
Okay. Didn't understand.
Are there any other questions on these items?
I just want to make a couple comments. First, it seems like this ROD grant has come before the board in several different times in several different ways, and it seems like getting money from the state is a multi-step process. And we keep approving things, and we're like, but does this make the project start? And every time it hasn't. So, once again, this is just a baby step on getting those funds secured for Burris Township. But there's still a lot of work ahead of us on renewing and improving projects and making it happen. And then I just want to make a comment on the air exchange in the classrooms. that, Mike mentioned, we couldn't do that, we couldn't afford to do it at home. But on the other hand, we don't have 30 bodies breathing air in one room at home, so there's no need for that. I can certainly see in a public school, the need for that and the requirement. And then also, I just want to acknowledge and thank Rod for all of his work and organization and really knowledge of how the state works and how to apply for these things and the timing and getting right on it. And also the work he's been doing on figuring out a way for us to afford it. He's been building up to this for a couple of years. We've been able to put aside some funding in our maintenance reserves and such. So, I mean, he's had some long-term planning in effect for this, building up for a couple of years. And we're actually poised to be able to take advantage, of these. And it's really his work and knowledge of the system and the accounting that's done that. So I just want to thank you, Bob.
Thank you.
Good.
Mr. Byrne?
Yes.
Mrs. Smarter?
Yes.
Dr. Burek?
Yes.
Mrs. Cassell?
Yes.
Mrs. McGowan?
Yes.
Mrs. Shaw?
Yes.
Mrs. Richard?
Yes.
Mrs. Wolford?
Yes.
Mrs. McCune?
Yes.
So I think you had a couple of things from the minutes, right? And then
Right.
we're going to do the budget last.
Okay. What the, let's see, just make sure I got it all. So, we talked about the, Mr. McLaughlin gave us a preliminary budget snapshot as part, oh, we're going to do it last, sorry. The other thing we heard from was I don't listen often, the Wells Fargo, our insurance broker, came to our meeting and made a presentation for us. They're our health insurance broker, and we found that he gave us a presentation because the product that we're currently using for health insurance is no longer going to be offered by Horizon Blue Cross Blue Shield. It doesn't necessarily mean anything about the benefits that people are getting. It has no effect on that. What it does have an effect on is how we're going to be financing and paying for the insurance over time. We used to have a minimum premium payment, make sure I have the language, a minimum premium plan that we've been using, and they're not going to offer that anymore. We're going to have to do something more likely to pay premiums monthly, like is typical in the insurance world. Really, this is an opportunity for them to come and tell us that this is the change that's coming. We're going to have some opportunity to go out to bid with perhaps other insurance companies and see if we can get the best, but anything better for our employees. But at the end of the day, the level of benefits we don't expect to change at all. All we're hoping is to get a good price and do it the best we can that way. So that was the presentation there. We don't come up for review, or the renewal of the policy is in July. And between now and then, we'll get some bids, and they'll come back and give us a presentation about that. And to the extent that, because we're changing how the premium works, there'll be some costs associated with that, more than likely, because of the way we've been rolling over our costs going forward. But we can deal with that as we go moving on. I don't think there's any reason to get into that right now, because we don't know exactly what our costs are going to be. But we've had a good relationship with our broker, and I think we've been very pleased with the amount of low renewal costs that we've had over the years, so hopefully that will continue. The other issue was the preliminary budget overview that Mr. McLaughlin gave us. Perhaps do you want to talk about that, since it's yours?
Just want to spend a minute really and just kind of update the board. What we have is a kind of a brief snapshot, if you will, of what we see in terms of revenues, expenses, and some of the major components of the budget at this point. But I think the most important thing to keep in mind is that we don't have state aid or state debt service aid numbers yet. We will in fact receive them by the end of the week, by Friday. The governor is expected to give his budget presentation tomorrow. However, he does not actually release the actual numbers at that point to the districts or the detail. That's done by the Office of School Funding, and they have up to 2 days until after his presentation to the legislature to do so. So normally the DOE has those numbers posted on its secured portal website by Friday morning, shall we say, and there's a mad rush with every VA in the state trying to hit the system at the same time to see what their numbers are, trying to see if you won the lottery. But at this point, we're hoping that the lottery is nothing more than keeping us afloat. We haven't been given any reason to believe we're going to get an increase in funding. That would be nice. What we're hoping is that there will be no reduction, obviously, in funding. So what you see presented here really is assuming that the numbers for state aid, which are a little over $3,057,000 for categorical aid, that does not include the extraordinary aid, which is not determined by the state legislature until really June. And debt service aid, the aid that we receive for the serial bonds that we have outstanding, and the state pays a portion back to us for 80%. So we don't know what those numbers are, and that's, last year that number was $300,000 for us. We're least checking into that this year. But overall, when you look at this is kind of big picture kind of stuff. It doesn't give you a whole lot. It gives you a sense of, what the total budget might look like. Total operations would go up $1,400,000. Capital expenditures are up just about $500,000 plus. You'll see that, and there are, by the way, I'm going to ask you to remind the public that there are copies up front for everyone who's interested in what we're talking about discussing at this point. We anticipate that we will use the 2% permitted levy increase. However, we also anticipate that there will be an offset to that. If you recall, we refinanced another $52 million of its outstanding debt service back in October of 2013. And the upshot of that is that for the upcoming year, we will have probably about a $420,000 reduction in terms of the total debt related portion of our levy. So while the general levy will go up, the debt levy portion of the tax load will go down by $420,000. We'll have more exact numbers on that, obviously, as we get this finalized, and we will reach out to the municipal assessor and municipal administrator to get the current assessed valuations, to give you kind of the exact breakdown on the taxes. We always do that as part of the public hearing, which is a statutory requirement, which, by the way, this year the legislature moved back by a month, so we'll be doing that on the 8th of April, just to remind everybody on that. And just wanted to, touch on one or two other quick pieces, which is there's a breakdown in there of the budget and fund balance, so we can kind of see where the money is coming from that makes up the fund balance. And capital projects. The capital projects that we're moving forward or anticipate moving forward in this year's budget would be obviously the Ridge High School driveway project that we had anticipated this year, but due to timing and other pieces, that'll actually be this summer. The Queen Anne Middle School feature renovation, which is something that's been on the board's list of things to do for a little bit of time now, and identified for some time, is scheduled for this coming summer. We talked last October when we accepted a matching contribution from the Ridge Sports Foundation about the renovation of the Ridge High School Wellness Center, and that's scheduled for this coming summer. And then another item that's been on the district's radar for some time in terms of long-term capital planning was the resurfacing of the asphalt over at Liberty Corner School. So those 4 projects are there, and you'll note in the presentation that there is an identification above it of where the revenue comes from. You'll see that none of this revenue impacts or comes from any of our current operational revenue streams, and so it has no impact on current operations or levels of program and service. We always try to do that, so that's the other kind of, I think, big picture takeaway here is that the budget as tentatively presented here is based on current levels of programs and service. And I think last but not least, we want to mention the fact that with respect to obviously, we'll do that at the public meeting, which we'll do in April. But in terms of additional staffing, We envision that enrollment, a variety of programs and classes is going to determine that consideration for additional staff. And we'll present that as we did last year in April. We'll be able to give you, we have the finite numbers, just keep in mind that the various state aids, we're talking about $4 million worth of funds. We see where that, how that's going to be developed, and we're assured of that. And as we get towards April, May, we're going to have a better handle on what enrollment is going to be. We'll be able to give a more finite answer about the actual number of staff and how those staff are going to be allocated. Right now, we have just kind of generic placeholders in terms of dollars. But if there are any questions, I'm glad to. Sean?
I know you said it, but I didn't catch it understand the terminology you used. So it's about the 2% increase, and I know it was 1.5% last year. So can you just?
Yeah, the calculation. Yeah, I can. So last year it was 1.5% because we had done refunding last year as well. The impact of this year's refunding will be somewhat greater, but in terms of work, refunding the debt service. So the 2% is the general, right?
Oh,
2% fixed.
The 2% is the
we've
fixed.
always had the 2%.
We've always had the 2%, but the impact was less than 2% because you think of it as basically if the cake is one layer, 2 layers, it's a 2-layer cake basically. There are 2 pieces in there. One is the recurrent operations levy, which is the 2%, and the other piece is the debt service, which is at the time that the community passed the various bond referenda, they agreed to make those payments. So we've refunded that. It's like refinancing your home mortgage. You drop your payments on that. So the net effect is overall the total outlay for levy for taxes will go down, theoretically, the way it's supposed to work. We'll have the exact calculations when we get to the April presentation, because we like to get the current valuations of what's an average assessed property value and all that sort of thing for that presentation. We usually get that from the municipal assessor's office through the township administrator usually before we do that on a presentation.
Any other questions about the budget presentation? Okay, I guess we're up to personnel. I need a motion to move items 1 through 31. Personnel tab.
I move items 1 through 31.
Second. Susan?
Are there any questions? It's mostly standard.
I had one. I saw in the summary, offer was rescinded, something was given on it. Can you just elaborate? I've never seen that before.
Yeah, we could rescind an offer for a number of reasons. In that case, the person accepted another position before they started. So we rescinded, yeah, we have to take official board action on it.
The salary guide advancement, is that based upon graduate degrees or what, item 21?
It is mine, yeah, it's based on the graduate degrees.
Anyone else? Do we have a roll call?
Mr. Byrne?
Yes?
Mrs. Swarnick?
Yes.
Dr. Beer?
Yes.
Mrs. Cassell?
Okay.
Mrs. McGowan?
Yes.
Mrs. Shaw?
Yes.
Mrs. Richmond?
Yes.
Mrs. Woolford?
Yes.
Mrs. McEwen?
Yes.
Madam President?
We're up to policy. Do I have a motion to approve item 1?
I'll move item 1 on policy.
Second, Ruthie?
All right, let me just report this item is a second reading on the policies that were introduced at the last month's January meeting, end of month meeting. These policies are derived from the new legislation for Achieve New Jersey, and they're required policies from our Strauss estimate. And it just basically puts into our policy what the legal code is for these different categories of staffing and then what their review process is.
I would just like to comment, I didn't understand the first reading, nor the second.
They were very long policies. We looked at them in more detail at the last policy meeting, and really there's nothing I can bring out that, and we talked about, the park assessment and the requirements, and went into more detail on that. And it's, it's things that have all been presented, but it's just written into these policies now.
Mr. Byrne?
I will abstain.
Mrs. Smart?
Yes.
Dr. Burek?
Thanks to a quadruple latte, I was able to read through all of these. Yes.
Mrs. Cassell?
Yes.
Mrs. McGowan?
Yes.
Mrs. Shaw?
Yes.
Mrs. Richmond?
Yes.
Mrs. Woldridge?
Yes.
Mrs. McGowan? Excuse me, sorry, Mrs. McCann?
Yes.
Madam President.
We're up to curriculum.
Curriculum committee did not meet in February because of one of our many snowstorms. So we're scheduled to meet again, I believe,
And we obviously, I reported last time and we haven't met again yet since then. Liaison reports? Everything's been snowed out, so there's nothing going on.
well, and there haven't been any
Yeah.
additional meetings since I left.
Okay, so we are now up to item 10, which is public forum on other than agenda items. If you have something that you'd like to speak about, please come up and put your name and address on the clipboard. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm going to start by saying hearing you guys continues to be a problem, and I'm only in the 8th row. So we need you to remember that we're here, because we can't hear you. I'm sitting with a gentleman who's a relative newcomer. He said, repeatedly, we can't hear them. So if we're videotaping this for the purpose of the community, I think we need to remember they probably can't hear it if we can't hear it in row 8. That said, the other reason I came up here tonight is just to, once again, talk about the calendar. Given the experience that we've had with snow this winter, I hope you'll reconsider the mistake, and I believe it was a mistake that we made, not starting school earlier this year, and allow us the opportunity to not go from January to June without a 1-week break. Thank you.
The name is Parag Dagar at 274 South Finley. Good evening to the board. Question for the administrator, Mr. Markheim, about the YouTube recordings of the board meetings, except for a January meeting available when you do a search on Google Chrome. None of the other meetings are available for viewing. As well, we request that you consider putting a link on the Board of Ed's website so that you can access those YouTube videos directly from there. Because when you enter even Bernard's Township Board of Ed into YouTube search bar, it takes you into Board of Eds of many other townships all over New Jersey. So, and then there's 7 or 8 pages of those meetings in there. None of them referencing, except for the one from the January, referring to Board of Ed meeting for our township. So kindly look into that, please. any comment from you on that today about the status would be appreciated. It's really nice to know you got the publicity in the local newspapers, but the process is still incomplete and needs to be finished. But, thank you. As well, a ditto on the hearing, we really cannot hear you well enough, especially when the secretary was speaking today earlier.
Hi, I'm Linda Fagan, Independence Drive. I implore you to reconsider what's going on with the calendar as well. I spoke about the calendar months ago when I disagreed with the decision that was made. It's not that we foresaw that this was going to happen, but did we not learn from last year that things happen? And I was told very firmly that, oh, you have a junior. Well, since we don't have a February and an April break, make sure you schedule all of your college visits during April since you've lost your February break. Don't worry about it. You have April now to schedule all of that. Well, here I stand. I have a junior. Don't have another chance. Don't have another chance to go on college visits. Don't have another chance to take her out. This is the year her grades count. This is not the year I can pull her out of school for a week to go do those college visits that I was told not to worry that you don't have February and April to do it anymore because you have April. I don't have April. I don't have another chance next year. I couldn't do it last year. This is the year. It was supposed to be February and April. You took away our February when I implored you we needed it. Now we have no April because we didn't look ahead and say, gee, what happened last year could happen again and can happen again next year. We pleaded to start school early. We pleaded to reconsider all these other options, and we were met with no, 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 no. Great. My child suffers. I'm not happy.
Hello, Jeff Boslin, 35 Van Cortlandt Way. I have a couple of things I'd like to talk about. First is the turf field at Ridge High School, which I think we all know has been there for about a decade or so, which has effectively outdated technology. If you go to any turf field in neighboring towns, you will see much safer, better technology. And also, if you look at our field, it probably gets more use than any field neighboring towns, and that's because we only have one. And we also rent it or lease it to non-school teams, which is fine because we collect user fees. I think we in the public wonder where those user fees go and why that's not used to resurface that turf field. But I think it's something that gets strong consideration, or should get strong consideration from all of you, because we're only an injury or two away from that hard surface that exists, or that carpet that, and I do use the word carpet, that bubbled last spring in the rainstorm. Those are signs that there's a problem there, and it would be great if you could consider a capital improvement. You collect your user fees for the next 10 years on that field anyway, it'll pay for itself. It's just a matter of getting it done and getting it financed up front. So that was one subject. The other subject is one that's very personal. I go to bed late every night, and every night I go to bed and I see my 16-year-old daughter up. And then I get up at 5 o'clock or 4:45 and I go to work, and I see my 16-year-old daughter up or sleeping on the couch. And I always ask her, Amanda, why are you not in bed? And the answer is always, Dad, I got 2 quizzes, 2 tests, a project due on Thursday, quarterlies next week. So what's my point? My point is this. I honestly believe that we have a tremendous school system here, but we're in danger. My wife and I have raised this issue with guidance counselors, with teachers. Teachers will say, we're not much we can do about it, you need to talk to so-and-so. We talk to the guidance counselor, and they say, you gotta push it up the ladder or the chain. So we do, often falls on deaf ears, but it's an issue that I'm sure you've heard about before, but it is really becoming a problem. I think the school district should clearly rethink quarterlies. You cannot learn an environment. I would challenge all of us to say, how much would you learn if tonight you had to go home? How productive would you be tomorrow? Tonight you had to go home and study for 2 tests after this. That's what they do. Every single night it seems like. My daughter had one friend who had 19 quizzes, tests, quarterlies, and projects in 2 weeks. How do you learn? When do you have time to learn? And oh, by the way, if you're always testing in school, where do the kids go through the material? Not with the teachers. They're going through the material at home. So it's a real issue in the district. Look, they're learning a phenomenal amount of material, but the problem is the stress level is going through the roof. My daughter's handling it okay, but she doesn't sleep. If she slept, she would not be handling it okay. And by the way, it's not okay that she's not sleeping. So I just implore you all to think about that. I mean, quarterlies conceptually are an okay idea, but not when the new material starts the day after the quarterly and you have 7 classes. Remember, in college, you go to class less than half as much as you do in high school. So when you look at like how much time they spend actually in school and then studying for tests, there's no time for anything else. Like learning, I don't know how the mind even rests. Whereas you get a lot more downtime in college. There are definitely kids in that high school who are looking forward to going to college because it'll be easier. And that's hard to believe. And look, it is a great school, but it's in danger. It's in danger, and we're starting to lose good students from the school district because they don't want to go through it. So those are my 2 topics. I thank you for your time, and I hope you give them a lot of thought. Thank you. I guess the one thing I would add, my daughter's pretty tough, but you know what? High school's supposed to be fun too. There should be some fun. I think the fun is not. Thank you.
I know I shouldn't be talking twice, but unfortunately, Mr. Roslin brought up something that's just too close to my heart. My daughter is in exactly the same position as his daughter, Amanda. These kids are in honors and AP courses. They're told if they don't take honors and AP courses, that they're slacking off. My daughter's an exemplary student. She's going to get into any school she wants. That's not the problem. The problem is my kid is saying, Mom, would it be a bad thing if I went to a safety school? Because I don't know that I want to continue this pace. She's up till 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning. She's not alone, obviously. And her friend across the street laughed in the morning when they got on the bus because they see whose light went out last at 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning. There's a real problem when they think that it's normal to be up till 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning finishing, and they have the same projects or whatever, and then going into school with 4 hours of sleep. These kids are 16 years old, and they're looking for college as a way to be more relaxed and more fun than high school. This is a sad state of affairs for our high school. They are looking forward to getting away from Rich. That's bad.
Is there anyone else for public comment? Okay, this time I'd like to close public comment. I think we had a couple responses to some of the issues that were brought up.
Sure. So a calendar was brought up. I'll table that for just a second. Try to get through some of these other things. The video recordings, I agree. that we need to get them posted. We've been working on it. Unfortunately, we're having some problems getting files compressed. We set up the compression, started at 4 o'clock in the afternoon when the class of students and the teacher that are working on making these videos is leaving for the day, and it takes 15 hours to compress, and then you come back in the morning and you hope that it didn't crash. And we've been having some problems uploading as well with those things crashing. So we're really trying to get these things posted, believe me. It's not because I want accolades from the newspaper about posting our board meetings. Believe me, I don't really care about that. I'm just trying to make them available for people. My goal is to definitely put a link on the website in the same area that we have our link for Board of Ed meetings and agendas. I want a link that says, you know, Board of Ed video recordings, so that we can have those as well, because, you know, I'm sure everybody wants to settle in with popcorn and catch up, just like it's, you know, a season of some favorite TV series. So, but in all seriousness, I do want to get that accomplished, and I'm sorry that we haven't been able to do so far. But we are continuing to try. We're certainly gathering all of the data, as we are again tonight, recording, and I have every belief that sooner or later we will get them all posted, and I'm trying to get it done sooner rather than later. But I realize, you know, we're behind already. We did get the first meeting recorded, and then we had January 27th and February 10th. So I know we're behind. We're trying to get it done and come up with a good way of doing it. I also know that we're working on getting it available on public access TV as well. We have, my understanding is, 2 major carriers of cable, I guess, in town, and we have arrangements and testing done for one of them. We want to make sure that we have both working at the same time, so that regardless of who you've chosen to be your provider, you can view, and, you know, not half the people in town can view and half can't. So we're working on that angle as well, so that ultimately we may have YouTube and public access, or just one or the other. We're continuing to try to figure out what's going to work best for us, and we're trying not to spend a lot of money in getting that done. We have students at the high school and a video media production course at the high school working on creating these videos for us, so that we're not spending a lot of money having somebody doing them professionally. And I think, honestly, that's slowing us down a little bit. If we had that, we'd probably be a little faster, but that's okay. I think it's a great exercise for the kids. It's practical, and we hope that using the public access channels, we can include more of our presentations instead of just putting them as links on the website. Just scroll a variety of them at certain times of the school year where it makes a lot of sense. You know, for example, Sean and I talked about the academic planning night, and scrolling that for a week around the time that we were doing that night. If somebody can attend, they can still view it that way, rather than, you know, going and downloading the link, which also works. You know, we try to get more ways of putting out the same information. So hopefully we can do more of that going forward. Let's see. The issue of the turf field, I can tell you that that is on our long-range facility plan. We are monitoring that field. We do impact testing on the field on an annual basis, and I anticipate that we will be doing that this summer, grooming and adding some of the pellets to try to get a little bit more life out of that field. I see you shaking your head, and I know that it's not an ideal scenario, but it's not on the agenda for this summer. It may be for next summer. I realize that there is an end of life there, and it's not going to last forever. I understand that. Quarterlies, tests, and stress, we're going to be presenting March 10th. So I would encourage you, if you brought that issue up and it's on your mind, that you come on March 10th. We have kind of a review of the state of all of our various standardized testing protocols, as well as some discussion about park testing and where we see that going, because we know that that's going to be a major issue for all of us next year to manage. So we have to start talking about that and trying to get people aware of how that's going to work to the best that we can determine at this point. We've gone to a lot of meetings at the state level. In fact, we just went to another one on Friday, and we were told that this was meeting number 2, where we were going to learn about more details of park. And when we arrived there, the agenda was completely changed to talking about technology. So it was, I don't want to say a waste of time. It wasn't what we went there for. We didn't get the answers to the questions. So last week I drafted a letter to the community about park testing to try to start informing people about what was going on. And I held off, hoping that on Friday I would get more information. We didn't get that, so I'm going to go with what I know. This week I'll be sending out a Friday folder mailing about the park testing to at least give people an outline of what to expect for next year, as well as point them in the direction of the details that we'll talk some about on March 10th, but there's a lot. It would be a 3-4 hour presentation just talking about park testing and the Common Core. So that's why I'm going to put this letter together to try to provide some resources and point parents in the direction where they can get more information on top of whatever else we can provide on March 10th. So I hope to pick up on the quarterly topic there as well. That's going to be on the agenda for March 10th, as well as some information about stress that we have from the stressor survey that we had last year. And also on March 10th, we'll talk about MAP testing. That's measures of academic progress, thank you, that we're using right now in some scenarios at both the elementary and the middle school. So we will talk about testing there. I don't have an answer for you about calendar. I understand the frustrations of trying to get things done when things go wrong in the schedule. I also know that this board has tried to negotiate with the Teachers Association to try to get more flexibility about starting the school years earlier and bringing students in earlier and bringing teachers in August so that we have more time to accomplish things. When you have a finite start date and end date that you're trying to accomplish so that you're not ending the year very late, you're confined a little bit. And if you have labor issues that don't help you get things started earlier, it can be a problem. So I realize that it is very frustrating for people that have plans of all sorts over our April break, but I don't have an immediate answer or solution for that at this time. I think that was more or less everything.
We're up to board forum.
I'd like to attempt to interface too with the audience comments. I think it's great that you make the comments, and I think we ought to try and respond. It's awful tough with the calendar, early start when you're limited to September 1st, and early ending, and you have bad weather. I'm not sure that the goal is realistic with the limitations put on it, so I'm just being realistic. I think it's great to talk about it, but being realistic, maybe it's not a very good plan, because I think college visitations are important. Stress level, thank goodness your students are good students. I worked a lot harder in college than I did in high school, and I went to a very competitive high school, and thank goodness it was a great starting point when I got to college. The school is much tougher than it used to be. It was much more relaxed, but we weren't one of the top schools in the state. And I think it's a blessing that you have these high-performing students, and if you want to compete with them, you have to work hard. And I appreciate that there's a limit. You have to watch that the kids don't overstress. But the body of knowledge has probably doubled or tripled or maybe even more since I went to college and high school. And yet the school year is the same length of time, and so are the classes. We're being expected to learn more and more every year. And it's a tough situation. And when you want to get into the best schools and get the best grades, it's a very tough thing. I appreciate the issue, but again, maybe the end result means that you have to do that. So that's my 2 cents.
I just say, with respect to leaf fields, it is something that the finance committee has on our long-term agenda. I can't think of exactly off the top of my head what the number is to replace that, but it's a big number. You know, Rod, ballpark? $500,000. And you see, you know, if you heard our budget presentation earlier in the night, that's just, you know, money that we don't have right now. And I think we'd all love to do it. We're looking for creative ways, and the reason I grabbed the microphone right now is we would love to figure out a way to do it. Whether we can figure out a way from the community, get support for it, that would be, you know, certainly something we consider. Certainly the user fees, and I don't have this on me right now either, but the user fees we get from the township club teams and things is a pittance, really. So it's not anything that we could actually use to really defray any of those costs, at least that's as I recall it. I don't have the numbers in front of me. We get about $30,000 a year that way, so that's really a drop in the bucket. I would love to see us figure out a way to do that. It's just that it's a big number, and if we could figure out a way, something we've talked about in our meetings recently is, can we figure out a way to get community support for particular programs that are important to the community, and you know, maybe that's one that is a big one that we could get help with. But you know, we'd love to do it too.
Well, I just want to comment that I can appreciate the concerns that were voiced on the workload from the high school. And that's been a concern of mine for years. But it's nothing new, because I remember 10 years ago, before I had children in the high school, people telling me my kid worked harder at Ridge than they did at college. It's just been the way it is here.
It's the testing, it's not the workload.
And I do believe there are a lot of assessments, but we are looking at changing quarterlies going forward. With that, I would like to request that you could also look at assessments and projects, because I haven't had a child there for a few years, but I recall a lot of special projects and group projects and time-consuming things, and I don't know if that's manageable. And also just the number of assessments. I mean, 19 within 2 weeks, I could sound like an awful lot. And kids staying up, you know, until 1, 2 in the morning just can't be healthy either. So I don't know how many kids are doing that. I know when I had a high schooler, she was doing it. Not all kids can handle that. So I would like to just voice that I'd like to get looked at again, along with the stressors. Thanks.
I'll just echo a couple of things that people said. As far as the calendar, I agree with what Mike said. We're working with limitations, and it's very frustrating because you know, we'd love to be able to have more flexibility. And unfortunately, with snow days, you know, it's not a good situation this year. And you know, I know a lot of people have plans, and people just have to do whatever they think is best. You know, with the April break week. I have a junior also, so I'm in the same predicament, so I know exactly what you're talking about. And the other thing I wanted to say was in terms of the stress and the quarterlies and testing. I think everyone here has heard loud and clear, you know, what people think of quarterlies. And so we do hear you. I think we'll be hearing it at the next meeting about some ideas for going forward. You know, we're concerned, you know, with the park tests and all the testing that's going on, and how to do it effectively. You don't want the testing to take away from the learning. And so, you know, it's definitely something that it's all at the top of our minds right now, and I think we just have to be patient and wait a little while, you know, and really hear everyone's thoughts. I'm sure what we're next.
I guess about the quarterlies, and I'm new to this board, but my understanding from the quarterlies, and my children experienced it 1 year, but there was a huge effort. There were surveys undertaken of the parents on the concept of it. So we went through a lot of thinking and analysis before going to the quarterlies. So, and it seemed to be, if I'm not mistaken, what the vast majority of parents want. So, with that premise and that assumption, I guess we didn't know or didn't anticipate certain things that ended up happening with quarterlies. So it was difficult at that time to anticipate the sorts of problems that seemed to be occurring as a result of the quarterlies. That didn't appear to be the case, I guess, 3 years ago.
Yeah, we're going to review the history of how we got to where we are. And you have to remember, a lot of people didn't like the terms and finals also, and that caused a lot of stress. So nothing's going to be a perfect solution. I don't think testing is fun for any students. Like, no matter what kind of testing we have or don't have, no one's going to love it. But we definitely are going to, discuss this in the next meeting.
I didn't take notes, but I definitely have 2 kids in high school, and I've experienced a variety of things. And there were many things wrong. Okay, first of all, can you hear me? Because I can barely hear myself.
Take it out of the stand and hold it.
Can you hear it now?
Yes.
Okay. So, I've experienced midterms and finals and quarterlies, and there were very clear, obvious reasons to evolve and improve from midterms and finals. I don't want to get into those reasons, and I have to say, any transition was well thought out. However, it's never perfect in a real world. And I have to say the administration has tried. Have I agreed with everything? No. But I think they have genuinely tried. There's a feedback process. And the people who are happy are not here complaining. It's only the people who are unhappy or certain small things that have happened. And it doesn't evolve, and those aspects don't relate to every teacher at the high school. So I would like to give some credit to the administration for still trying to do the right thing and address the situation. However, are we at a great place? No, I think there's room for improvement, and we're working on it. So I'd like to say we're working on it. The other thing is about the stress. I have seen the race to nowhere, and I think there's quite a few inaccuracies in the movie, which is a separate conversation. But we, as the administration, has done things to reduce the stress. The projects that you're referring to, that my son had the older one had to experience, are no longer there. You don't physically need to meet students anymore. They can do things online. You don't need to buy poster paper and glitter, and you don't have to be teeing stuff to hand in a project. All that's artificial work that's been removed from the high school. So there are things that have been done to reduce the stress. Now, my husband's a pediatric adult sleep expert. Can I tell you, in my house we're screaming at our kid to go to bed? We're telling him to not do work. But then we eventually find out they're on social media. They're checking to see who's up the latest, but somebody took an afternoon nap and they're up the latest. Unfortunately, there are people who sign up for more activities than they should be. So this is not just an academic problem. This is a family, community problem. How many activities do you want to do? Can you handle the activities? Is it on the weekday? Is it on the weekend? And I don't want the administration to think they have to do everything to solve everybody's family problems. So I feel like it's not fair to them. Then lastly, I've gone through the college visits. This particular year, we had a week of school that started late. The universities were all open the first week of September. If you wanted to, you could do your college tours before the beginning of this academic year. You could do the college tours. This is not an interactive audience conversation. So if you wanted to, you could have. You have sports, you have other activities, other commitments, that's your priority. But there were times throughout the school year which I had to take advantage of. I had to adjust my personal schedule. So once again, I don't think it's administration's responsibility to schedule everybody's personal family things. It's not fair to them to have to do everything. And we are trying with contract negotiations, and we are trying. It's not as if nobody's trying. We are trying. And I think the parents need to own up to what they're scheduling with their own kids for their own activities. And you can't put the onus completely on the Board of Ed. It's not fair to the Board of Ed. So I had to say my piece. Just, I'm done.
I do agree, probably 80, 90% with you, but I think if you set the target so that it's not attainable, with the early start and the early close, I don't think that was a realistic schedule to begin with. And I think it was asking for a problem, which occurred 2 years now in a row. I'd like to be a little more realistic until we get some relief on the early start. To lose both vacations, I think is a mistake. Somebody made a mistake in the scheduling, and I think they were trying to, in my opinion, to meet everybody's needs and wants, and I think they compromised the possibility of achieving. I don't disagree with you. And sports are important to an awful lot of parents, and if you miss those first couple practices, you're not going to be on the team. So, and you might even hurt the performance of the team. So, I don't know. It's a complex issue.
Well, part of the problem is the late end date with the calendar. And I know there are some audience members here who made a lot of issue of the late end date last year. So you can't not lose something in the school year if you're trying to end earlier. And that was, I know, a priority when we're trying to accomplish things. And also, as far as college visits, I don't know, my family did them in the summertime. Colleges were open, they were taking interviews, giving campus tours. I don't know, I couldn't leave on any of the breaks because I had a multi-seasonal athlete. So we did it in the summer, you know, and I don't know, I don't get that we have to do it in April and February break. So that's my part of it. Thanks.
We're up to adjournment. Let's make a motion for it. Second?